It's already more than 60 years ago. When I graduated from the gymnasium, the director of our gymnasium told me, Francis, you must go and study medicine. And I asked why. I am good in physics and chemistry and in, say, in mathematics. And I intended to be an engineer. Unfortunately, he said, no, you must go and study medicine. And he was a very good psychologist. And I believed him, and I chose medicine as my future profession. So it was by chance. No, I don't know. It's because during my career I met a lot of people who said me, you must go this way, and this is the best way for you. And these were mostly brilliant people who saw the future of anybody 20 or 30 years before I reached this age. But I think I met at the right time the right people who helped me to choose and to work in my profession, in nephrology. It was, you know, I was working at the clinic for internal diseases. And in the 60s, our clinic divided into 4 parts. One was devoted to gastroenterology, the second in cardiology, the third in nephrology, and the fourth in diagnostic, isotope diagnostics. And because at the very beginning of my career, I was working in pharmacology for 7 years. And after 7 years, I have to change my interest because a new director was chosen as the head of the department of pharmacology, but he was not a good one. And therefore, I decided to leave pharmacology and to join internal medicine, the clinic of internal medicine. And I was right at that time. It was a brilliant professor. He's still living. He's actually at 96 years old, yes. And I worked with him for almost 25 years. And he saw the development of nephrology for the next 30, 40 years. He knew that nephrology will be very important. And therefore, all my scientific interest was directed in studies connected with nephrology. Introduction of the flame photometry changed completely our knowledge about homeostasis in our body, because before in the 50s we couldn't estimate sodium, potassium at all. And by the introduction of a flame photometer, it was possible to estimate the concentration of these very important ingredients of our blood in some minutes. And this changed completely our diagnostic and therapeutic possibilities. And of course, my doctor thesis was devoted to changes of renal function during artificial hypothermia in dogs. It was an experimental thing. At that time, it was very important to know how are kidneys functioning at a temperature which is below 30 centigrades, because they intended to operate heart failure and heart vitia at a lower temperature, because all the metabolic changes at a lower temperature are less intensive, and therefore the prognosis for the patient was better. And then I developed, I was interested in the mechanism of diuretic drugs. This is also connected with nephrology, because diuretic drugs are connected with the excretion of electrolytes by the kidney. And this was my PhD degree in '63. And so I developed and go on and go on. A little bit later, I was interested in the endocrine regulation of electrolytes, the renal regulation, hormonal regulation of electrolytes. And I estimated all the necessary hormones which are involved in the regulation of water electrolyte metabolism. So we become a very important center for studying abnormalities in the homeostasis of the human body. Sorry?
No regret in...
No, never. I think that if I would be born once more, and I would decide whether to study nephrology or psychiatry. It's quite curious, but I expect that in the nearest future, the greatest changes will take place in psychiatry. Psychiatry is very important for all people, Almost 1/3 of all the white population has some abnormalities in the mental status. Therefore, I expect that psychiatry will develop tremendously in the nearest future. Yes, I met in my life one great master. He was a brilliant man, and he's still living. I told you, he's actually my patient. He's at the age of 96 years old. And he saw the medicine for the next 20, 30 years. And he was really my father, he was my mentor, he was everything for me. He never cried, he never shouted at anybody. And the way he was educating his collaborators he was the example for everybody. He was in his office at 7 o'clock in the morning. There was a meeting of all doctors in the early morning, and he was 5 minutes earlier than everybody of us. So it was impossible to come later. This is an example how he influenced all the collaborators. In addition, he was a very clever man. I'm thankful for my Lord that he allowed me to meet such people during my career. You know, this is very difficult to define because it depends upon you, what you are regarding, what is an example for you, and it's dependent also from external conditions, from the environment also. And I think the principle of a good master is that he is influencing his collaborators by his own behavior and by his work and by speaking with his collaborators and his approach to different people. He don't differentiate great people and ordinary people, say, educated people and not educated. Everybody is very important. And this was the principle from him. And this impressed me very, very much. He was greeting the femme de ménage, everybody. He was regarding the value of each people. This is the greatest principle. And then, of course, there are some characteristics which you can't express in numbers. Somebody is irradiating with warmth, and he's contacting you immediately. And some others are rejecting you. You are very, you must be very, no, I can't find the exact term for that. You must be very it's very difficult to translate it into English, but you must be careful with everybody, with everything, by contacting him.
And how are you as a master?
You have to ask my collaborators. Some of them were not satisfied with me. I'm aware of that, because if I was at my office at 7 o'clock and he was coming 5 minutes later, so this was well accepted, and they were aware of that. It happened once, too, and the third time I told him, why you are 5 minutes late? You see here, your colleagues are coming earlier, 5 minutes. Altogether, we were 30 persons. 30 times 5 minutes is 150 minutes. We are losing. We were waiting for you. This is impossible. We can't lose time. Time is money.
Do you like to teach?
Yes, especially young people. Young people, because young people are the future of medicine and the future of the world. And I think it is young people are deciding what will happen in the nearest 50 years. The greatest revolution I expected will take place will be driven by young people, because unemployment, they are very well educated. Young people are mostly very well educated, in contrast to the past when only selected young people had access to education. But actually, education is almost accessible for everybody. Everybody can have it. And two, there is a great unemployment rate all over the world. In our country, it's actually about 12%. That's very high. We had, 30 years ago, we had practically no unemployment. So actually, it's a very high rate of unemployment. And this is something leading to nihilism.
Please.
I know what I have done and what I have not done. I tried to help development in formerly Eastern European countries. It was very difficult to develop, you know, because there was the Iron Curtain dividing Europe into two pieces, and the eastern part and the western part. And it was thanks to my connections with some important people who allowed me to have contact. So it was almost in the 70s when I connected Eastern German nephrologist. It was Klinkmann. We met at a congress and we presented there our first results upon renal and plasma renal activity in acute renal failure. This was a very important finding. plasma renin activity is rising in acute renal failure. And this was very important for Klaus Thurau, who examined the so-called tubular glomerular feedback mechanism. And in this way, I was introduced into the nephrological mafioso. Yes. We elaborated 15 tests for the estimation of most important hormones, which were not accessible in Eastern European countries because they had no hot currency to pay for kits for estimating, for example, aldosterone or parathyroid hormone and so on. So we developed tests by ourselves. We were independent from antibodies to estimate these hormones. And people were coming to us in our lab, more than 20 from abroad. They were learning how to estimate it, how to make it. And this, it's really it was very nice because many of them are actually professors, already retired professors. So I'm very young, you see. Unfortunately. But I feel very young. This is that's very important. I spent some time in Geneva as a young doctor, where I was a fellow in the Clinique Thérapeutique Universitaire, and I was working with Professor Mack. He was interested in endocrine alterations. At that time, he worked on the influence of diuretics on the excretion of sodium. In the 70s, I was staying in St. Mary's Hospital and Middlesex Hospital in London to learn how to extract PTH, parathyroid hormone, and how to estimate PTH. This was, at that time, only one center in all Europe was estimating parathyroid hormone. And I was staying some time with Professor Beard, also in London, where I learned to produce antibodies for angiotensin 1 and angiotensin 2. So all the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system was one object of our became object of scientific interest. So we were completely independent from the import of kits, so-called kits. And this was very important, especially for our countries, because we are a poor country as compared, for example, with Italy or with Germany. Or,
Germany, let's say with Germany.
We are richer than we are. Yeah. We are aware of that. But nevertheless, in this way, we were independent from the import, completely independent. And we were able to introduce endocrine estimations for most endocrine organs, not dependent from Western European countries. And until now, we are still using our antibodies for angiotensin 1 and angiotensin 2. We have got an animal with a titer of anti-angiotensin 1 and angiotensin 2 antibodies with a very high titer, 1 to 50,000, 1 to 50,000. So for one estimation, you need only 0.1 ml for one estimation. And we had 7, 8, this was a guinea pig, we had 7, 8 milliliters of serum. So we could dilute it 50,000 times, and this gives you can imagine, such a lot of estimation. We could estimate angiotensin for all Europe. And we are still using these antibodies. And therefore, we are very convinced about our results, because working with the same antibodies, not changing the test, the kits are of differential value, diagnostic value. And in this way, we are always working with the same antibodies. We are labeling angiotensin by ourselves. And so we contributed a little bit to the development of endocrine nephrology. Yeah.
Having 80 collaborators is the problem.
80 collaborators, and 15 of them are already professors, and 13 of them, additional 13, are PhD. They are independent scientific workers. So altogether I had promoted 77 doctors, MD, and 28 PhD doctors who became later professor, director of institutions. So this was my great input, because in this way, you know, licensed nephrologists become involved in the development of nephrology in our country. In our country, we have actually about, say, 500 licensed nephrologists who are allowed to be head of a dialysis center and with a nephrological unit as a background. In our clinic, 51 nephrologists were licensed, 51 for whole Poland. So approximately 1/10 of all nephrologists were educated in our center. There's a lot of them, it's a lot. We are covering an area of 4 million inhabitants in Upper Silesia, where I am living. It's from here about 80 kilometers from here, not very far from the Pope, John Paul II. He was born in Wadowice. It's not very long from here. You have to go there in order to see how modest conditions created a very eminent person. It's amazing. It's really amazing. You know, development of some direction of studies in nephrology were very much advanced abroad, and at that time, because we were a poor country, actually we are much more, we are rich because we are belonging to the European unity. As somebody is not very satisfied with that, but personally, I think it's very good thing that we were joining the European unity. And if you are visiting different centers, you will find every time something which you can use in your further work, scientific work, or private, also in private. It is sometimes a bad one, but you can learn something. I was visiting St. Mary's Hospital, where Fleming, was so Fleming, discovery of penicillin. His lab was a very bad one. Everything was in disorder. Fungi and bacteria were growing everywhere. But he was finding something which a lot of people were looking on, and they didn't interpret it. Why bacteria are not growing in the presence of some fungi? And so great progress can be done in very simple conditions. It's up always from your spirit and the brain, good associations, and good collaborators. A very important point of change in my scientific work was producing anti-PTH antibodies. Anti-PTH antibodies. PTH, the parathyroid hormone, consists of 83 or 84 amino acids. And the human PTH is a little bit different from bovine PTH. In the 70s, only bovine PTH was available. Actually, by recombinant molecular technology, it's possible to produce a human PTH. But at that time, we have to use for immunization of PTH, bovine PTH, bovine PTH. I went to St. Mary's Hospital and was staying with Dr. O'Regan. He was the only man in Europe who developed antibodies against bovine PTH. But bovine PTH has some fragments which are completely identical with the sequence of amino acids of human PTH. So he immunized guinea pigs with this bovine PTH and received antibodies recognizing fragments which were identical with PTH of human bodies, of the man. And among 90 guinea pigs immunized, only one gave antibodies cross-reacting with PTH, with human antibodies, with human PTH, with human PTH. You can imagine that I was coming back to my country, and the first question was to collect parathyroid glands from bovine, 6 kilograms, at least 6 kilograms. One parathyroid gland of bovine is approximately 0.5 gram in bovine, 0.5. So we have to collect approximately 12,000 parathyroid glands. How to do it? It was impossible. I was very dissatisfied that I can't do it. We could buy it in Chicago, because there are great, how it's called, slaughtery, where they are killing, slaughtery, yes? They are killing cows. And it was the cost of some $40,000 to $50,000 to buy 6 kilograms of parathyroid glands. So I was very sad when I came back. That's impossible to introduce in my lab. And it happened, there was a patient, a female patient, coming to my clinic with hypertension, essential hypertension. And we diagnosed that she had an aldosteronoma. She was operated on, the blood pressure normalized, and from the surgery department, she came to me with her husband, with a bunch of flowers, thanking me that she is now at good health, blood pressure is normal. And the husband leaving my office, stand at the door and ask me, Professor, can I help you on something, by something? And who are, of what profession? You are a doctor? No, I am animal doctor. I am animal doctor. Animal doctor? The Lord had sent you to me. Why? Because I'm working at the slaughtery in Upper Silesia, where they are killing per day 100 cows. And he was the head of the endocrine department at this slaughtery. They were collecting the adrenals and the thyroid glands at that time to extract the steroids from the adrenals and thyroid hormones from the thyroid. But parathyroid, I told him, I need parathyroid glands. And he answered me, I have no knowledge about this. I've never seen parathyroid glands in cows. But I will call you in 2 weeks what I can help, what I can do for you. After 2 weeks, I had a call and he told me, I already knew what are parathyroid glands in the cows, where are they located, and my technicians exactly can isolate it from the thyroid gland, because the parathyroid glands are located behind the thyroid gland, behind. And there's different color and size, and they identified it exactly. And during half a year, we collected 12,000 parathyroid glands. And we started to extract this parathyroid glands. First, we have to use the so-called defatting. That means to remove lipids from this parathyroid glands by acetone. And you receive acetone powder of parathyroid glands. And then you have to use 60 liters of ethyl ether. And everything must be done at a temperature of -8 degrees, -8 degrees. When I was in London, we have done it in the Medical Research Council outside of London. And firemen were coming in order to stop everybody entering this building, because we are using such a lot of acetone and of ether. You know, a spark would need to have an explosion. So what I have done, I have to wait for January, when our temperature outside of our building was -20, 25 degrees. I have to wait for the time when my boss was outside of the clinic. He was not on spot, because he would never allow it to do it in the clinic. In my lab, one room was opened, all the windows were opened, and we had the temperature of -8 degrees. And we started, 3 persons started to extract it, the process of extracting PTH. It was really dangerous. Before that, everybody signed that he's aware that if something happened, he is responsible for that. So from this 6 kilograms, it was 6 kilograms of PTH, we received 160 milligrams of TC3 chloroacetic precipitable PTH. That was a degree of purification of this PTH, which was enough for immunization. And we started immunizing guinea pigs. And after half a year of immunization, one guinea pig produced antibodies giving cross-reactivity with human PTH. So we became completely independent of everybody, and were, after O'Regan from London, the second center in Europe, estimating PTH. And you know, PTH was estimated, 25-hydroxyvitamin D was estimated. We have broadened our interest in the calcium phosphate metabolism in this way, because nobody could do. And so it happened by chance. By chance, we paid for this PTH collecting, for the glands, for collecting PTH glands, only some chocolates and some coffee for the technicians who collected this. We paid nothing more, nothing more. So we saved approximately $50,000. And this was a great progress, for this pushed us forward in our endocrine investigations. It's going in a not correct direction. Technical development is separating the patient from the doctor. And actually, the doctor has, only in our country, we estimated it that only 10 to 15% of his time as a doctor is connected with a direct contact with the patient. Everything, the 85% of his working time is devoted to administrative, bureaucratic processes. He had to write about all drugs he are using. He must say this drug is the right one for this patient, and you have to prove it. You have to prove it. I'm a doctor. I know that this is an antibiotic which is effective for treating a patient with pneumonia, for example. Is an example, and I have to talk to this stupid administrative man that I have to use this antibiotic and not another one. That's not necessary, and this way, you know, most time devoted are to administrative purposes. This is not necessary. It's not necessary, and sometimes it is enough to contact a patient only personally, to touch him, and you will completely know what is happening, what is the reason of his bad healthy state. And it's not necessary to perform thousands of tests and diagnostic procedures, something completely not necessary. And the patient is very happy if you are devoting to him some time and you are dividing his misfortune. This is very important. This is more important sometimes as drugs you are using for him. And this is not a good, direction of development. It's not a good one. You know, all the diagnostic procedures are separating the patient from the doctors, and the doctor is looking on the patient by the results of several diagnostic procedures. Of course, they are very important, but these are only supplements to the general impression you are getting by contacting the patient. You know, it is very important to interpret all diagnostic tests in context with the patient. Otherwise, if you are looking on the test, not seeing the patient, you can do very great mistakes, because lab mistakes are occurring everywhere. And therefore, we must strengthen the contact between patient and the doctor. And if you have diagnostic tests and you have the objective feeling that this patient has some abnormalities in the abdomen or in the chest or something like this, your diagnostic procedures will be much more effective. All these three factors are connected with each other. I think good teaching without research and without clinical work is not very effective, because it's very impressive if somebody is doing research by himself. He knows everything of the methods used for giving some results, and young people are almost very eager to hear from a competent man how to develop own interest in some fields. So I think that research, teaching is interrelated with each other. There were many exciting moments, and most of them are that sometimes I had a patient at the first moment I said, this patient should die, And it turns out that he didn't die. He didn't die. And I was very much surprised, you know. As a young doctor, I had a patient with obstructive pulmonary disease, obstructive. And he lost consciousness, and the family came to me and told me what to do. Nothing. You must prepare everything for his death, because he will die in 3 weeks. He will die. And after 2 weeks, he didn't die. After 3 weeks, he didn't die. And finally, he got consciousness again, and he lived 2 more years. And the family came to me and told me, we are prepared for the funeral, and you must take now the, how it's called, the place where the dead person is preserved. It is, how it's called?
The coffin.
The coffin. You must buy the coffin, because we have bought the coffin, and actually the man who sold this coffin, this is not my problem, so you must buy it. So from that time, I never said that this patient will die or he will not die. It was some, and such situations happened very often. You are contacting some patient, you are coming to the room where the patient is on the bed, and you look on him and you say, the prognosis is very bad, and this patient will die. And my assistants told me, Professor, how do you know that this patient will die? You know, I don't know exactly. I can't express it in numbers or can prove it directly, but he looks that he's looking on the other side of our globe. He will die. When I was entering the room, he was not looking on me. That means he was discussing his future with somebody else than with the doctor. And this happened not very rarely. This happened. This patient were aware that he will die, and he already talked with St. Peter or with his representative what the future will be for him. So this is very important. And such surprise moments in my life, a lot of them. Sometimes I was surprised that people who were who were really near the death didn't die, and the opposite was due. It was also true that somebody who's at the first moment had the impression or where I was impressed that he will successfully go out from his disease, and he died. So medicine is always, there is a factor of uncertainty, and you must be very careful with prognosis. Very careful.
Did you buy the coffin in the end?
At the end, I didn't buy the coffin because I had no money for that. I had no money for that. But this was a great problem for me. It was really a great problem. The family came to me and said, you have to buy the coffin. Really a bad prognosis, but you must be this modesty. You must be, the longer you are a doctor, the more careful you are with all your opinions. You must, because you are not 100% sure that the prognosis is good or bad, or is it bad. We have not always good biomarkers of a prognosis. We have not. Of course, we have some biomarkers who are good, but they are not perfect. They are not perfect. There is something we can't express in numbers. We can't calculate the mean and the standard deviation and the statistical significance, but something we can't do it in this way. We can't do it. I told you that my director of the gymnasium, when I got the license of maturity, he told me, you must go and study medicine and not mathematics or physics or chemistry, because I was interested in this field. And I asked him, why? But he told me, you must go and study medicine. There is something you can't express. Why? There are some characteristics in the expression of your face or of the kind of expression, your opinion, or something more, you know. When I met our Pope, our Pope at the Vatican, we have in 1990 an audience, the council, EDTA council, I organized it at that time at the Vatican, and what I felt was the contact with our Pope. He was irradiating with something you can't express it physically, you can't measure it, but he has something in his presence. You have a feeling which can't be objectivized. You can't express this in numbers, in measurement of some parameters. You can't do it. He was a saint man. So we are sinners. I am a sinner. So maybe the contact with a holy man was that I was feeling it, that I'm a very great sinner. Everybody is a sinner. There are, of course, there are holy men, and they don't differ. They are not different from ordinary people, and they are holy men. Of course, it's the best anabolic for anti-aging metabolic, anabolic, anti-aging anabolic, working. We should not stop working up to the last day of our life. I think that working is a very important anabolic factor. Anabolic factor. Of course, and you must be fit. This is also very important. Physically and psychologically, you must be fit. But aging can't be avoided. You can only extend your life, like apoptosis. Apoptosis, you can only postpone it a little bit, but you can't avoid it. You can't avoid it. That I still have a lot of people who have good contact with me, who are visiting me. We are discussing different problems. We are working, we are writing some reviews on some topics in nephrology. So I have very good relations with most of my former collaborators. This is very important. This is an anabolic factor.
And the clinical practice.
Yeah. Yes. My successor is Professor Więcek, who is actually the secretary of EDTA, and I have two rooms, and I have everything what is necessary for me: a computer and faxes and scanners, and so I can do what I want. It's very important to have contact with the clinic, once per week we have a scientific meeting, and I'm participating always. Sometimes I have a lecture for them. Many things. When I was a young man, I was interested in foreign languages. And I tried to learn also Chinese. But unfortunately, I was not very successful, because after 5 lectures, I have to stop, because it was too difficult for me. It's a completely different language. But actually, by aging, you are changing your preferences, what to do. It's up to your physical and mental fitness, what you can do and what you prefer. I preferred swimming, for example, hiking, and so on. Actually, what you can do at my age. I had 5 years ago an accident, and my Achilles scene was ruptured, and therefore I have difficulties with my left leg. So I must adapt to this. But nevertheless, I'm satisfied. Ethics is always influenced by politicians. And this is a bad one. Especially the talk about when life is beginning and when it is ending. Is it possible that doctors are involved in vitro fertilization? It's a great problem in our country, because Poland is Catholic. 90% of the population is Catholic by confession. So this is a great problem. Should we agree in vitro fertilization, or should we support how it's called, euthanasia? Euthanasia, yes? Euthanasia. Should we? Are we allowed? It's not allowed. It's not allowed. And in my opinion, it should not be allowed, because, you know, people are so bad-mannered that they can use it then for killing some people who should not be killed. Unfortunately, my wife died 5 years ago. She was suffering diabetes. She was 69 when she died, but she was genetically predisposed for diabetes, because she was coming from a family with diabetes. And all her uncles and aunts, they all were suffering from diabetes and died because of myocardial infarct and say vascular complications, unfortunately. But my sons are all doctors, my sons. And my the wives of my sons, the wives, are also doctors, except one who is technician. And I have 7 grandchildren. 4 are girls, and 3 are boys. And 2 of them are already doctors, and 2 more are studying medicine. So 4 doctors will be. 3 are at 11, at the age of 13 and 17 years. So we have to wait, maybe, what will happen with them. So somebody teased me always that I will open mafioso, Dr. Mafioso, Kokot's mafioso in medicine. And I have no history of medicine in my family, because my I'm coming from a very, very poor family. My father was a bricklayer, and my mother was a farmer. And I had three brothers, and none of them were doctors. None of them. They were simple workers, physical workers. So it was also by chance that a teacher in the elementary school came once to my mother and told her, "You have to send Francis to the gymnasium." It was before the Second World War, and for attending gymnasium we have to pay. And because they were very poor, they said, "No, it's impossible. It is impossible." And after 1 year more, the same teacher came in, and we will try to support him financially by getting some financial support from the gymnasium. And in the whole gymnasium, there were two fellowships. And one of them I have got. And this was the reason why I was able to go to the gymnasium. And during my staying, my learning in gymnasium, I had to work very hard at home, and I had to sell newspapers from one house to the other in order to have some money. I think it was very, very tough, and it was very difficult situation. But this is the way, you know, if you knew what is poverty, you understand the poor people. People who are rich, they don't never understand what means poverty. Never. It's the same. The same is true that if you are not sick, you don't understand exactly what disease means. You don't understand it. You must also be once sick and dependent upon other people. This is philosophy. He had one son, and his wife are nephrologist. They are working in Frankfurt. But they are not interested in science. He told me, "Father, if I have to work so hard as you have done, it doesn't work. I will be an ordinary doctor and contact patients. I can do something what is important for the patient, being a good doctor."
Nothing.
I understand you. Life is interesting. Life is interesting, and people are interesting, and everybody, regardless from his education, have some positive and some negative characteristics. And it is the task of everybody, of doctors, to find the good characteristics of everybody. And this is not very easy. It's very easy. This is coming from the talk, the interview between the patient and the doctor, but there are some physical moments which you can't express by numbers and by tests, and you will find out what is good and what is bad. Is it a good man or is it not a good man? But generally, I believe into the good mood of everybody. I am optimistic. My wife was always talking me, "You are the only man in our country with such optimistic view on life." The only one. This was my way of being, and I think if you are every day lost in depression, is a day lost. Irreversible. You can't do it. You must be always every day you must see some sunshine and some positive things. Not everything what seems to be bad is bad. And therefore, I am optimistic. It's very important for my personal life and also for my approach to patients. For my personal life, I believe into God, that God is existing. And especially when I am in a state of depression, everybody from among us, we have moments of depression, everybody. They are transient, but they are. And if you are a believer of the Catholics, you can pass these drops into of your depression very easily, more easily. And this is very important. And also, if you are a believer, your approach to the patient is a different one, because he is my brother and this is my sister. Not only my patient, but it is my brother and my sister. And you have to follow the commandments to love your brother and your sister is the second main commandment of God. To love the God, the first one, to have one God and to believe to Him. And the second one is to love your brother and your sister as yourself. And therefore, I think this is very important. This is my life philosophy. I have no time to follow poetry. Really, I have no time. Sometimes during my holidays, I'm reading. Poetry is very important, but you must be prepared to understand poetry. And if you are very busy in your profession, you will not have time enough to understand poetry, every type of poetry. We have Polish poets, very important. I know, of course, some important writings of them, but you know, I am always unhappy coming to my office and there is a heap of journals not read, and it is not decreasing because every time there are coming new newspapers and you must look at least on the contents and you must select what you have to read in abstracts and what you have to read in extent. When I was director of the clinic, I was following approximately 10 types of scientific journal, 10. But only abstracts. One paper per day was written, was read by me in extenso. One per day. It is not so easy to do it, because some papers you have to read twice to understand it. Actually, I am in the position to follow 10 journals, but I can read in extenso 2 papers. I have more time. Also very important, 2 papers in extenso per day. And I asked my collaborators what they are doing. And they told me, sometimes it happened, I read 1 paper per day, but sometimes it happened, I don't read any paper per week. Any paper per week. So, being retired has positive and negative phases. They must be prepared that medicine is not a profession which will be compensated by high financial income. they must be dedicated to patient. This is the most important things. And money is not the most important things. Unfortunately, the number of such people is decreasing. Everybody's interested to have money, to live only once per life, and do what you can, how it's called in Latin. It's Horace told it, carpe diem, carpe diem, carpe diem. You have to use the day, you have to use and do all what you can do, and you can consume as much as possible. This is not the right way. It's not a, it depends upon the age, upon your experience with people. But nevertheless, most important is the dedication to the profession. The dedication, you must be dedicated. A doctor who is not dedicated to his patient is not a good doctor. He's not a good doctor. He can do very bad mistakes, and he can even harm the patient. Can even harm the patient by his behavior, by talking to him in an inappropriate way. So you must be very, very careful. Unfortunately, the consumptive approach of doctors is increasing. Is increasing. Dedicated people are decreasing. At least in our country. Be prepared that you will not have a great salary, and you have to work very hard, very hard. You will not have a free Saturday and Sunday. You will have to be in the hospital at night, at day, everywhere, every day, regardless is it a feast or isn't it a feast. If you are necessary, you must be at the disposal of the patient at any time. And this is a problem. This is a problem. If you have a family, your wife or your husband is saying, well, what is our family? You are not at home at all. You are not at home. What our children are doing, they don't know you. You don't talk to them. And this is also very important. By dedication to your profession, you are losing something in the development of the appropriate dimension in the family, which are also very important. Very important. So, in my family, we decided, my wife was eye doctor. She was eye doctor, ophthalmologist. And we decided that she will be dedicated only partially to ophthalmologist, as an ophthalmologist. She was working 4 or 5 hours per day, and the other hours was dedicated to the family. She had to look for children. This is a great challenge. At that time, it's a great challenge. You must look for you must talk to children, you must teach them, because this is your family. And actually, most women are not prepared for such an approach as a family. They say, I have the same right to be a famous doctor, and the obligations of a family must be divided equally between the husband and the wife. This is not possible. From nature, it is not possible. I can't replace my wife, and my wife can't replace me. This is determined by the nature. But nevertheless, I think that what I would suggest to everybody that medicine is a wonderful profession, a wonderful profession. And if you are dedicated, you will have great satisfaction that after teens of years of practicing medicine, you will say, yes, I have not lost my life. I'm satisfied.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I can tell you some other moment which is very important.
Yes.
I was in St. Mary's Hospital. We were estimating plasma renin activity by a biological method. In nephrectomized rats, and this method was dependent upon the biological activity of the rats. The results were not very much reliable because there were so many factors influencing the reactivity to angiotensin, and I was interested in producing antibodies to angiotensin 1 and angiotensin 2. And I tried to do it in guinea pigs, and I was not successful. I didn't know why. I went to Professor Peart in St. Mary's Hospital, and there was a doctor from Australia, Boyd. His name was Boyd. And he was the only man from the literature, I find out that he produced antibodies differentiating angiotensin 1 from angiotensin 2. There are only 2 amino acids difference. So this must be very highly specific antibodies. I arrived in St. Mary's Hospital. Boyd said, yes, please look. The technicians is doing it, the estimation. The estimation of by radioimmunoassay of angiotensin 1 and 2 is nothing new because the basis of radioimmunoassay for angiotensin is the same as for insulin or for growth hormone and so on. But one thing he didn't show me, the method of immunizing guinea pigs. Every time he prepared, he was going to the animal house to immunize guinea pigs and rabbits in order to receive anti-angiotensin antibodies. He found out, we will do it very late this evening, very early this morning. And I felt that this is a very important thing. He is something he will not show me. He will not show me. It was a Saturday morning. Usually, we were not working at St. Mary's. And I went to the lab. I had something to do there. And there was Mary, a technician. And I asked her, Mary, what we are doing? I'm preparing a homogenate of angiotensin 1 and angiotensin 2 to immunize rats, guinea pigs and rabbits. And I asked her, can I help you? Yes, because I have an appointment with my girlfriend, with my boyfriend, and therefore we will be very happy. We will do it very, very quickly. And I was looking how she was preparing. She was preparing this homogenate of angiotensin. Angiotensin was adsorbed on charcoal. Then you have to add the Freund adjuvant, and you have to homogenize it in such a tube, going up and down, up and down. In my lab, I organized an electric motor who was running this how it's called this? I don't find the exact term for that. If you have your tube and you have inside, you have such, and you are doing homogenation. And she was doing it by hand, without a motor. And I realized I was doing it by an electric motor, which had about 200 per minute rotation. And I find exactly when she was doing it, I was thinking, this is my point. I'm not successful because by such a this great number of rotation, angiotensin is destroyed because the local temperature is too high and split this angiotensin. And I was right. I went to the animal house, I looked there, we were coming back, and on the day, Boyd was coming, and he asked me, what you are doing here? Well, nothing, I was helping Mary to immunize. But she was very much surprised, and Mary was not aware of that, and this was a great point to be successful. I came back to my lab, and I was doing also by hand. And in 6 months, I had fantastic antibodies, angiotensin 1 and angiotensin 2 antibodies. You know?
So it was good that Mary had a boyfriend.
Exactly, exactly. And she was not aware. She was not aware what she was doing. She was not aware that this is a very important point in the production of antibodies, not to destroy the antigen, not to destroy the antigen. So I've talked too much, I think, no?
No.
But I see this Boyd, this man, he was disappointed. He was disappointed that I had access to the animal house.
Jealousy.
Yes, jealousy. He was not interested that other people were doing something. And this point was not in the description of production of antibodies, was not written.
Never.
No, was not written. I met Rieden, who showed me how to produce anti-PTH antibodies. After 30 years, we met, and I told him all the history, how we collected parathyroid glands, because he bought these parathyroid glands in Chicago. And he had to pay for them $40,000 or $50,000. And he was very satisfied. I have this letter in my files, and it's one of the very important things. He was very satisfied. And one of his, assistants, because I was a pupil of him. He was older of me, and he has a great family also. He had 7 children, yes. But he was a good man, you know. As I told you, I met very important people at the right time, at the right place. This is very important. You must also fight for a good teacher. You must fight for that.
Yeah.
And you are not always very successful. Teachers are different. They must be different, of course.
Yes.
But as you told me, jealousy is something very bad character. Somebody is jealous. This negative factor. If somebody is if some of my friends is successful in his work, I'm sharing this happiness with him. And happiness divided is double happiness. It's a double happiness. While misfortune divided is only half misfortune. Also very important.
Yeah. This is true.
And therefore we are going to be married, because if it's a good marriage, so can divide fortune and misfortune. And if we are solitary, we have no other people to tell him, I'm sad, I'm happy, and so this is something bad in life. But my mother was in Silesia. Yeah. It's the region of our Pope, Pope John Paul II.
Yeah.
I met him 3 times.
Wow.
Personally, I had a talk with him. And you have, sure, you have information about the audience of the council, EDA council with him in 1990. It was very important meeting because at that time he officially said that withdrawing an organ from a death from a person is he called it in Italian, una sfida della generosità cristiana. Una sfida della generosità cristiana. I remember it, you know. My Italian is very bad, but I remember it. It was in Forum Romanum. It was published several times, and it was the first declaration that the disposal of organs, this is something, this is a challenge for Christians. It's a challenge because it can do something beneficial for still living people, severely ill people. One boss was in Lublin. It was in 1978-9. He was elected on October 16th, 1978. At that time, I was attending the Congress of Internal Medicine in Rome. And only two Poles were attending this Congress, 2 Poles. I had a lecture on electrolyte disturbances in liver cirrhosis. And it was, I was coming from the Congress. It's a Viale Veneto, the albergo. I remember the way. It was Viale Veneto. And the receptionist called me, come to the TV because somebody from Poland is elected Pope. And I asked him, who is it? Is this Wyszyński or is it Karol Wojtyła? And he told me, tutti nomini polacchi sono difficili. And I went down. And there was the first Urbi et Orbi. And the Pope said, yeah, I remember it is the first sentence. I am coming from vengo da un paese lontano. Vengo da un paese lontano. I'm coming from a long country. And people were replying, non lontano, prossimo. Non lontano prossimo. So I received congratulations in the name of our Pope. The whole albergo was full of participants of this Congress. And they knew he was the solo Polacco in nostro albergo. So I received this congratulation. The next day, I met somebody, my friend of mine from Slovakia, and he told me, you know, the inhabitants of Rome accepted, not well accepted, the Pope, the Polish Pope. And why? You can read it, and it showed me a newspaper, and there was written, il popolo romano ha ricevuto il Papa caldo. You know, this is the opposite what you are telling me. Caldo is warm. Caldo is warm, and Freddo is cold. He was so surprised. I didn't know that Caldo. He knows the German language. Caldo, kalt, and so it was a wonderful meeting. Il popolo romano ha ricevuto il Papa caldo.
I remember, as I told you,
I didn't, sorry, I interrupt you. This was the first time he was visiting Poland, and at that time I was rector of our university in Silesia. And there was a meeting of all rectors of the whole Poland in Lublin. It's the Catholic University of Lublin. That was the first time. The second was the audience in, it was April 30th, 1990, where he declared the famous declaration that withdrawal of organs from people who died is sfida della generosità cristiana. And a third time in 2002, there was a process of beatification, and I was asked to, it is a secret, but I can say it. I have to examine miraculum, whether from the medical point of view it is right or is not right, and I was asked to say my opinion, and I arrived at the Vatican. At that time, his state of health was already bad. He was suffering from Parkinson disease, and really it was a different person as compared with my meetings before, 2 meetings before. But his thinking and his mental fitness was excellent, He remembered our meeting 12 years before in detail. Yeah.
Great. Really great.
Something more about our audience. One sentence. The sentence was, I was a council member at that time. It was 1990 exactly, and we planned to have an audience with our Pope, either before a Bari meeting. In Bari was a congress, nephrological congress, or immediately after the congress. And the cardinal responsible for this audience was negative, has a negative position. He had done everything not to organize this audience. He settled a date which was 2 weeks before or 2 weeks after the Congress or during the Congress. And we were disappointed. I had a patient, Archbishop from Tarnów in Poland, who was a friend of our Pope. He studied together theology, and he was my patient. And once I visited him and told him that I was ordered by the council to organize this audience with our Pope. And he said me, yes, once per month I am going to Rome and we are talking with our Pope. He was such a consultant of our Pope, a very, very brilliant archbishop. Not all archbishops are brilliant, but he was. And he returned and he said, the Pope agreed to to organize this audience, we have to write exactly the schedule, who will participate, how many people, who will have a talk, and how long it will take, how long, 20 minutes, half an hour, 1 hour. It was settled to the Bari symposium. It is 1 week before, and I don't have any response, any answer from this archbishop. This was cardinal. This cardinal. I remember his face, his stony face, you know, his stony face. And I called my patient. I told his priest, our audience will not take place. It's one week before, and we don't know whether we have a date of this audience. And what? It was settled by me with the Pope. I have my assistant priest, it was Kosztewa, a prelate, said he's aware that everything is settled. And Dziwisz, who was the personal priest of our Pope, was a colleague from his theological studies of this priest, who was an assistant of the archbishop, who was my patient. And he called the priest, the Dziwisz. Dziwisz is actually cardinal. When our Pope died, he was nominated cardinal. And he said, no, everything's okay. Kokot has to call me on Friday before our meeting at 8 o'clock in the evening. It was in 1990. In order to get connection with, telephone connection with somebody in the Western European countries, you have to wait 2 weeks, 2 days. Everything was controlled. So, what to do? I remembered I had a lady who was working in a telephone center for abroad. She was my patient. And I called him Ursula. She was Ursula. You have to connect me with Dziwisz on Friday at 8 o'clock. You must talk with your collaborators in Austria and Rome in order to have the connection at that time. So, okay, she said, I will organize it. I was in my office. It was Friday, 8 o'clock. Telephone is ringing. Pronto. Pronto. Oh, pronto. And I told that I have an appointment with Dziwisz at 8 o'clock, and I asked her in my bad Italian that to connect me with Dziwisz. And it took some more seconds, and suddenly I heard, proszę, please, in Polish. And I repeated that I have a talk to Dziwisz. And Dziwisz was on the other side. And he said to me, Professor Kokot, we know each other very well. I was surprised. I never met him in my memory. I never settled that I met him once. Maybe yes. I know you very well. I was ashamed not to have in my memory that we met once more. But he said, what is the problem? And I respected it. I repeated it. This cardinal with his stony face is doing everything not to have this audience movie. You can be sure you will have the audience on April 13th at 11 o'clock. You have to go to the Vatican at this place, and you will be responsible for everything. So the Congress in Bari was closed, already closed. We went to Rome. We went on at 11 o'clock at Porto, comment s'appelle, the entrance. The entrance was a private rooms of our Pope, and we were settled in the chamber, the throne chamber. No, and I was the moderator of this meeting. It was suggested to me to greet him in Polish, and all our conference then, our audience was continued in English. And we were waiting for our Pope, and suddenly somebody was coming behind me, and I looked, and it was Jewish. And he asked me, "Professor, come out from this hall. The Pope will be late for 5 minutes, and we have time to speak with each other." And we went out, and I was so ashamed. I said to him, "Padre, it's a shame that I don't remember that we know each other." Oh yes, it was in '76, 14 years before, when I came to your clinic with my mother, who suffered from a chronic renal insufficiency, and it was an irémie passé. It was end-stage renal failure. At that time, we had in our clinic only one artificial kidney, which was ready for acute renal failure treatment, not for chronic one. But we introduced her and dialyzed her, but she died. She died. And he said to me, "I thank you that you accepted her, admitted her to the clinic, and I have the satisfaction that at that time I have done everything for my mother, and I thank you once more." You know, after 14 years, he was recompensation. It was a recompensation. Throw the bread to the sea, and it will come back to you once again. It will come back to you. Sometimes you have to wait several years, but really, it will come back to you. Throw the bread to the sea, and it will come back to you after some. It come back. And this is the case of Jewish. And I had the last meeting with him was in '22. It was the process of beatification of somebody. And I met the Pope, and after the Pope was Jewish, and was handshaking. He asked me where I'm coming from and so on. And after that, he gave me a rosary. You know what is a rosary? He gave me a rosary. And I said to Jewish, "And a rosary for my wife, can you give me?" And the Pope was just then. And Jewish sent to me, "For your wife, a rosary?" "Yes." "And for your secretary, not?" "For your secretary, not?" And he gave me 2 rosaries, 2 additional rosaries. So this is my, excuse me that I am so,
No, it's
well. Some more questions? During my first meeting with the Pope, I gave him my textbook of internal medicine. I wrote a textbook in internal medicine. And he looked at that. So, now I will know what kind of disease are inside of me.
how
Positive and negative ones. Genetics, for example, I'm very careful in to, how it's called in English, to be profit in medicine. It's very difficult because genetics until now have done more harm than profits. Genetics, more harm than profits from the therapeutical point of view. And you know, we know actually the genome of the human being. We know it. What we don't know how it is operating. Epigenetics effects, you know, they're so difficult. We have not million genes, we have only 30,000 genes, not more than a fly. And nevertheless, we are superior in our development. Why? And I think that this is a very dangerous, it's a sword with two eggs, with two corners. And we must be very careful introducing development genetics, not modern knowledge of genetics into medicine. Must be very, very careful, because it is unforeseeable to check the point of the stop reaction by introducing new genes into our genome. We don't, the box of translation of this information is confined by a starting point and by a stopping point. And we don't know exactly the stopping point. And by transposition, only by one nucleotide, the translation will be completely different, and we can develop some diseases and some new forms of life, which can be very, very dangerous for the human beings.
Optimistic and cautious?
No, must be very careful. Nature is much more clever than we are. Oh. To improve nature, must be very careful to improve nature. Must be very, very careful. One paper in extenso.
In extenso. In extenso. No,
and the other only the summary or abstracts, if I'm interested in. But I was asking my friends, it's very difficult, you know, that you are so busy, that sometimes it's impossible to read in extenso some papers, and some papers are written in a style which needs to be reread.
Yeah, which needs some more reading.
You have to look, in order to understand it, you have to take a textbook about a chapter which you don't understand exactly. In basic science, for example, the nomenclature is so developing. You don't understand even the alphabet. There are new. The alphabet is enriching every day, and we don't understand even if you are speaking about the same process.
Yeah. So you have to learn a new alphabet. For some papers.
I was translating 3 or 4 editions of Harper's Biochemistry. Do you know Harper's?
Yes, of course.
And I was translating it, so I was obliged to understand it, to understand. And when I came back to my knowledge in biochemistry during my medical studies, and now it's completely different, completely.
I imagine you as a physician, and was thinking they are very lucky, no wonder.
But during my long professional life, I learned so much about to be modest modest and once more modest to be, because nature is so complicated, and nature is so nice, and we have to look on that and highly appreciate it, and not improve nature, not improve nature. And this is also an art to look on the patient. The facts are laying on the ground, but you have to look on it and to find the pearls of nature.